America has long been seen as a land of opportunity, a melting pot where cultures, dreams, and people from across the globe come together. But is that dream fading for foreigners? In this video, we'll explore the 10 U.S. states where living as a foreigner is becoming increasingly challenging. Whether you're planning to move, travel, or are just curious about these shifting dynamics, stick around, because the last state on this list might leave you shocked. Number 1. Alabama. Let's start with Alabama, a state that has struggled with a reputation for being unwelcoming to outsiders. In 2011, Alabama passed HB 56, which at the time was the toughest anti-immigration law in the country. Although parts of the law were struck down, its impact lingers. Many immigrant families still face an atmosphere of fear and mistrust, especially in smaller towns. The economic landscape isn't much better. Foreigners often find themselves stuck in low-wage jobs with limited opportunities for upward mobility. On top of that, Alabama's social services can be hard to navigate, particularly for those who aren't fluent in English. What about daily life? For newcomers, the lack of diversity in many areas can make it hard to find a community. While cities like Birmingham are slowly becoming more inclusive, progress is uneven. Living in Alabama as a foreigner often feels like swimming upstream, but Alabama isn't the only state where policies and cultural divides pose challenges. Our next state has its own complex story. Number 2. Arizona. Arizona is famous for its breathtaking landscapes, but for foreigners, living here can feel less than picture-perfect. The state's proximity to the Mexican border means immigration is a hot-button issue, often leading to intense scrutiny of anyone perceived as an outsider. Take SB 1070, for example, a law that allowed police to demand proof of citizenship during routine stops. While parts of it were struck down, the law left a lasting impact. Many immigrants, even those here legally, report feeling targeted. This has created an atmosphere where even simple tasks, like driving to work, can feel nerve-wracking. Economic challenges also play a role. Many rural areas lack job opportunities beyond seasonal work, leaving immigrants dependent on low-paying positions. Meanwhile, access to affordable housing remains limited, particularly in booming cities like Phoenix and Tucson. Yet Arizona's immigrant communities remain resilient. From vibrant cultural festivals to thriving food scenes, there are bright spots, but they come with significant hurdles. And yet, Arizona's struggles pale in comparison to the difficulties faced in the Sunshine State. Number 3. Florida. Florida, a state synonymous with sandy beaches and vibrant nightlife, has long been a hub for immigrants, especially from Latin America and the Caribbean. But despite its diversity, Florida is becoming a tougher place to call home for many foreigners. One major issue is the cost of living. Cities like Miami, while culturally rich, are increasingly unaffordable for working-class immigrants. Rising rents push families into overcrowded housing or force them to move further away from job opportunities. Language barriers also come into play. While Spanish is widely spoken, debates over English-only policies in schools and workplaces have created tension. For non-Spanish-speaking immigrants, the challenges are even greater, but perhaps the most surprising hurdle is the state's vulnerability to climate change. Rising sea levels and stronger hurricanes disproportionately affect immigrant communities, many of whom live in flood-prone areas. Adapting to these environmental challenges adds another layer of complexity to an already difficult situation. Who knew paradise could come with such a hefty price tag? Number 4. Texas. Everything is bigger in Texas, including the challenges for foreigners trying to build a life here. While Texas is home to some of the largest immigrant populations in the U.S., recent policy changes have created a climate of uncertainty. For instance, the state has cracked down on sanctuary cities, requiring local law enforcement to cooperate with federal immigration authorities. This has left many immigrants, even those with legal status, feeling uneasy about engaging with public institutions. Housing is another big challenge. Rapid urbanization in cities like Austin and Dallas has driven up rents, making it hard for newcomers to find affordable places to live. Meanwhile, rural areas where housing is cheaper often lack the resources and job opportunities that immigrants need to thrive. On the cultural side, Texas is a mixed bag. While cities are diverse and often welcoming, rural areas can be less inclusive, making it harder for immigrants to feel at home. It's a state of contrasts. Booming opportunity on one side, significant barriers on the other. But if you think Texas is tough, wait until you hear about what's happening in Mississippi. Number 5. Mississippi. Mississippi may not be the first state that comes to mind when thinking about immigration. But for those who do settle here, the challenges are steep. The state has one of the highest poverty rates in the U.S., which disproportionately affects immigrant communities. Job opportunities are scarce, particularly for those without advanced degrees or specialized skills. Many immigrants find themselves stuck in low-paying, unstable jobs with little chance of advancement. Culturally, Mississippi is deeply rooted in tradition, which can make it difficult for foreigners to integrate. Tight-knit communities may not always be welcoming to outsiders, leaving many immigrants feeling isolated. Education is another hurdle. Public schools in Mississippi often rank near the bottom nationally, and immigrant children can face additional barriers, from language issues to a lack of support services. For many foreigners, Mississippi represents a tough reality. The American dream is harder to achieve in some places than others. So what happens when tradition clashes with diversity? Number 6. Georgia. Georgia is a state of contrasts. On one hand, Atlanta, a bustling hub of diversity, offers opportunities and a vibrant immigrant community. But step outside the city, and the picture changes. For many foreigners, especially in rural areas, cultural differences can feel stark, creating a sense of isolation. Georgia has also faced criticism for policies that some say disproportionately affect immigrant communities, like restrictive voting laws that require specific identification. Language barriers, particularly for non-English speakers, make navigating these systems even harder. Economically, Georgia is growing, but that growth hasn't reached everyone. Many immigrants struggle with job stability, especially in agriculture and factory work, where wages remain low and protections are minimal. However, the state's immigrant communities are resilient, creating cultural enclaves that offer support. From vibrant food markets to festivals celebrating global traditions, these communities thrive, but often in the face of significant challenges. And while Georgia's challenges are tough, our next state might be even more surprising. Number 7. South Carolina. South Carolina is often praised for its southern charm, but for foreigners, the experience isn't always as welcoming. One of the biggest hurdles here is transportation. Public transit is limited, particularly in smaller towns, leaving those without cars struggling to get to work, school, or even basic services. The state also has one of the lowest minimum wages in the country, which disproportionately affects immigrant workers in industries like agriculture, hospitality, and construction. For many, these jobs come with long hours, low pay, and limited opportunities for advancement. Socially, South Carolina's tight-knit communities can be a double-edged sword. While some neighborhoods are welcoming, others can feel insular, making it hard for newcomers to feel like they belong. Despite these challenges, South Carolina is home to a growing number of cultural events and initiatives aimed at fostering inclusion. But for now, progress remains uneven. Looks like Southern hospitality might come with a few conditions. Number 8. Louisiana. Louisiana is known for its rich culture, vibrant music, and legendary cuisine. But for foreigners, the challenges often outweigh the charm. One major issue is the state's high crime rates, which can create a sense of insecurity, especially in urban areas like New Orleans. Economically, Louisiana struggles with poverty and unemployment, and immigrants are often hit the hardest. Many find themselves working in industries like seafood processing or construction, where wages are low and job security is scarce. Then there's the language barrier. While Louisiana has a French-speaking history, modern-day immigrants often face challenges if they don't speak English. Accessing healthcare, legal aid, and other essential services can be a daunting task. Natural disasters add another layer of complexity. Hurricanes and flooding disproportionately affect low-income communities, including many immigrant families, leaving them vulnerable to displacement and financial ruin. Still, Louisiana's immigrant communities bring vibrancy to the state, proving that resilience can shine even in the toughest circumstances. But even Louisiana's challenges seem mild compared to the struggles in Oklahoma. Number 9, Oklahoma. Oklahoma might not be the first state that comes to mind when thinking about immigration, but for foreigners who settle here, the challenges are real. One of the biggest issues is the lack of public services tailored to immigrant communities. From healthcare to education, navigating these systems can feel like an uphill battle. English proficiency is a significant barrier, particularly in schools where resources for non-English-speaking students are limited. For immigrant parents, this adds stress as they try to support their children in a system that feels unaccommodating. Economically, Oklahoma has a growing energy sector, but many immigrant workers remain stuck in low-paying jobs with little room for advancement. Rural areas, in particular, lack the professional networks and resources that newcomers need to succeed. Despite these challenges, Oklahoma is seeing slow but steady growth in its immigrant population, particularly in cities like Tulsa. Community organizations are stepping up to provide support, but for now, progress remains slow. Still with me? Because our final state might just take you by surprise. Number 10, California. California is often seen as a land of dreams, but for many immigrants, it's becoming a land of contradictions. On one hand, the state celebrates diversity, with cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco serving as cultural melting pots. On the other hand, skyrocketing housing costs are pushing immigrant families further away from job centers, creating long commutes and added financial stress. California's progressive policies, like offering health care to undocumented residents, have drawn praise, but they've also sparked political backlash, creating a polarized atmosphere that can feel unwelcoming. Environmental challenges add to the complexity. Wildfires and droughts disproportionately affect low-income communities, including many immigrants, forcing them to rebuild their lives again and again. Despite all this, California remains a beacon for many, thanks to its thriving immigrant communities and opportunities in industries like tech and entertainment. But for those on the margins, the dream of California can feel increasingly out of reach. Is the Golden State still golden for those chasing the American dream?